Hello there, everybody. Yes, welcome back. Come in, get yourself a seat, etc. My name is Adam Cleary, and yes, I am the only man at What Culture who makes his bed. So, anyway, though, welcome back to yet another exciting episode of Things We Think and Are Going to Say. And before I start this video on why secretly WWE is failing, I just want to address the title with you for a quick second, because I can just imagine that the word failing might be raising a few eyebrows. Like, I can imagine you all sitting at home going, failing? Adam, WWE is failing. They have more money than God. When Vince McMahon dies, they're going to bury him in a sarcophagus full of all his riches, and when he finally gets to Valhalla, nobody there's going to say, wow, there's a guy who failed. How can you say they're failing? And you know what? I can't argue with that. You pretty much, you've missed out the bit where they're going to bury Kevin Dunn alive with him, a la Burns and Smithers. He'd be scratching and screaming, please let me out, as the camera goes in and out and in and out and in and out in the most ironic punishment imaginable. But yeah, pretty much that's all correct. They make loads of money. In a business sense, they are not failing. But, and this is of course very easy for me, a man who lives in a one-bedroom apartment in a city centre and has worked in the media for his entire life, to say, but when it comes to measuring success, money isn't everything. Oh yeah, of course, obviously it is. And in the short term, WWE financially are secure in ways they never ever imagined. But you just got to think for a second about what their business model really is, because that financial security comes from the fact they are selling their product to TV networks like Fox and also to on-demand services like Peacock. Those are huge generations of revenue for them. But WWE's business model is not to produce content for other broadcasters. WWE's business model has and always will be to convince pro wrestling fans to give them their money. And during the glory days of the company, the way they did this was through merchandising of popular wrestlers and live shows where you could see your favorite wrestlers, and pay-per-views where you could pay money to watch your favorite wrestlers have all their biggest matches, and of course more recently things like the WWE Network where they produce content for that and they put shows on there and yada yada, etc, etc. They make the thing, wrestling fans go, yes, I like this, I will put money into it. And while I'm sure the company will argue that they don't really care where the money's coming from as long as it's coming from somewhere, the reason these networks and these on-demand services are now paying WWE the money for the product is because they think wrestling fans will give them the money to watch that product. So they are adapting the business model slightly, but the reason they're having to adapt it is because on a fundamental level of having the confidence of the wrestling world, they are failing. Not just pulling that statistic out of my arse, by the way. Like, if you look at all the viewership numbers, all the interest in the product, literally everything that measures how engaged wrestling fans are with WWE, everything is down and has been down for a long time and is continuing to go down. How many times on this channel have we done a story about record low for Raw, or the gap between them and AEW closing gradually and gradually and gradually? They are on the decline, and decline in business is a failing. Now, that is the longest intro I have ever done, yes, but I just wanted to fully explain the title because it's going to give you much needed context to understand what we're talking about in this video. So there you are, that's what we mean by failing. Oh, and speaking of explaining things, I did just do a video for our gaming channel about the whole GameSpot situation, and loads of people in the comments were like, good video, but what are all those medals for in the background, Adam? I was looking at them, and very simple, thank you for asking. The answer is they're all for shagging. So, alright, so the actual video, why is WWE failing? I'll just slide over here, we get some nice little images for you. Yes, lovely, right, so WWE is failing because interest in the product from the perspective of wrestling fans is on the decline. Why is that? Well, the simple answer is the product isn't very good. The way they use the wrestlers isn't very good. The storylines they write aren't really very good. Like, you all got excited about Shinsuke Nakamura being back, and he had his cool old music, and he was getting all his kicks in, and we were all hyped for the push, and then he just got eliminated by Baron Corbin at the Royal Rumble, unceremoniously. Lol, sorry about that. The whole Alexa Bliss Fiend Randy Orton thing, like she had goo dribbling out of her mouth, and Randy Orton was seriously scarred all over his face one week and then just moisturized to hell the next. Like, this is the kind of stuff we used to laugh at back in the early 90s when WWE was getting really silly and didn't know what it had or how good its performers were or how good it was going to be in a couple of years. People made fun of it for this stuff, and now it's just TV. So many matches end with a distraction finish or a surprise roll-up or just some complete nonsensical reason. Most TV main events are written on the night and feel like they were. The product is just not good. Now look, don't get me wrong, if you want to turn around and say, but Adam, I actually really like WWE right now, I watch it every week, it's fine, then I'm not going to argue with you, it's subjective. But when you look at the numbers, I can tell you that A, not only do I not understand why, but also you're in a shrinking minority there. So it's really easy to sit there and think, you know what, is the reason WWE is failing and its viewership is shrinking is because the writing is so obviously bad. If they just started writing it better, then surely the show would be good and its viewership would increase. But the reason we're doing this video, the secret reason why the company is failing, is because there is something fundamentally wrong with the way it positions its stars. Nothing to do with the writing. You could write these guys brilliantly and it would still have a problem. To illustrate my point here, let's just take a quick look at the Royal Rumble. The closest thing pro wrestling has to a clean slate. You can put whoever you want in it, regardless of how well or how badly you've used them, what storylines they're in, what pushes they're getting, anything. You can just use whatever wrestlers you want, so long as the winner is in there. It doesn't matter who else is in, right? And Twitter user Andrew Stanford calculated that the average age of wrestlers in the Royal Rumble this year was just under 39. Now that is, and I say this as a man who is aware that his youngest years are behind him, old as balls. There were only 2 people in the men's rumble who were under the age of 30. Dominic Mysterio, lol, and Otis. Now if you're sitting there going, hang on, you for real here? The real reason WWE is failing is because everybody's around about 40. That's the video, is it? And I'm wasting my goddamn time. Then no, that's not the problem inherently. Like, ask anybody in the industry when wrestlers are supposed to be at their peak of their powers, of their athleticism, of their in-ring knowledge and nous. It's around about that age. That is not too old. Just to start getting a little bit more specific with you here, the problem is not that age or that anybody is that age. The problem is that everybody is that age. Everybody is at a stage in their career where they are experienced, where they have been around the block a few times, where they should be aiming for the top of the mountain, where they should be championship material, where they should be really technically proficient pro wrestlers. Everybody is at that stage of their career. So who loses? Like, think about it. If you and me, I've done that the wrong way around, are pro wrestlers, and you and me both need to win pro wrestling matches in order to look strong, and you and me enter a pro wrestling feud, who then has to lose some of those matches? Well, we both do. We both have to lose those matches, ergo neither of us are going to look particularly strong. And the only way you can offset that is by having screwy roll-up finishes all the time, and that is really, really not entertaining. So why is this just a problem now? Why have they all of a sudden got no kind of tier system? Why does there not feel like there is a top of the card or a bottom of the card, just a big, massive middle of the card? And, well, the answer to that, and the reason I'm wearing this hoodie, is NXT. It used to be undisputably that company's greatest asset, and now when you look at the state of the roster, it's starting to feel like its biggest problem. Right, let me start connecting the dots for you here, okay? Because nearly half of the entire field of the men's Royal Rumble was made up of people who not that long ago were in NXT. Some a year, some 2 years, some as long as about 5 or 6 years back, but fairly recently they were in the company's developmental brand. Now, how do you have nearly half the field feature in developmental and yet still have the average age place virtually everybody at the peak of their career? Like, the way this should work is WWE has a developmental brand and people leave there and enter the main roster to do one of 2 things. Either they are a prodigy, they are one of the most exciting talents the company has ever seen, and they begin a meteoric rise to the top, a la The Rock, or as we've just seen in that very recent WWE special, Yokozuna, or they go in at the bottom of the card, where they lose all the time, which is absolutely fine because they've just come out of developmental, meaning they are either A, very young, or B, relatively inexperienced, so nobody's expecting them to win any matches. They can eat as many losses as they like. Their journey is only just beginning. And yet, let's look at some recent call-ups, for example. When Riddle was in NXT, you're not allowed to call him that anymore, apparently people wanted to see him wrestle Goldberg and Brock Lesnar, and Keith Lee was one of the most dominant champions that brand has ever seen, and now they're just smushed in the middle, winning and losing as often as each other because nobody is at the right stage of their career. Who are some of the big names who often get talked about call-ups? Gargano, Ciampa, Undisputed Era, all of them average age around about 35. People we have seen for years and years and years. People whose careers we have all followed. People who have gone and made names for themselves on NXT who are at the peak of their careers and should be received as genuine champions when they go onto the main roster, but of course we all know will just end up smushed into this mid-card, winning and losing every week because, well, you can't have them lose because they're certifiably championship material, but also you can't have them win because everybody else is certifiably championship material. And this is the problem, right? How do you write compelling narratives and interesting stories if pretty much every single man on your roster is an aspirational champion at that point of his career where he should be winning titles? How do you write that? Because every single person who doesn't just win those titles is a loser. The women's side of things, I should point out, is a world away from all of this. There is a clear top of that card and a clear bottom of that card because for some reason they don't mind having certain women lose every single week while others win every single week. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but you can pretty easy, like if I say to you, who's at the top of the card in the women's division? You've probably got a couple of answers. And if I say to you who's at the bottom of the card in the women's division, you probably have a couple of answers. If I said it to you about the men's, you'd just be like, Look at the most recent call-up we've just had from NXT. Yes, Damian Priest was never NXT champion, but the guy is 38. He is at the peak of his powers. If he is not going onto that main roster to win titles, then what else is he going for? What storyline do you possibly have for him? He will not go and be a WWE champion. He probably won't even be an Intercontinental or US champion. So he's just another mid-card loser, which is a shame because he's better than that. And this is the real crux of the issue here, by the way. This is the real source of the problem. A lot of people have rolled their eyes at the amount of legends that WWE rely upon to get these big ticket events or to peak a network spike or something. But genuinely, if your entire wrestling roster is just an amorphous blob of a talented mid-card, how do you make anybody feel fresh and exciting? You can't bring somebody in young and give them a mega push because that's just not how you do things. So you have to bring somebody back because the fresh and exciting thing about 40 bajillion-year-old Edge is that you don't see that much of him. He returned from years and years away. He was fresh. They didn't have to build him up. It was Edge, for Christ's sake. They'd already built him up, but we didn't see him every single week. He hadn't been worn down by the problems of episodic television. It's the same with Goldberg to an extent, except now they've used him so much, you're kind of just bored of him already, because for every match he wins, he loses another one. Now look, I don't want to use AEW as too much of an example here, because then just you know what the comments get like. Every other promotion in the world has good examples of how to book a staggered card, but AEW very recently has a particularly good example, so that's why I'm going to use that, and it's Jungle Boy. Like, the guy is popular and famous and over, but he loses all the time. And why does he lose all the time? Because he's 23 and not that many people had heard of him before he went to AEW, so there's no expectation on him to win matches all the time. He wasn't an NXT champion. He didn't go have a 4.5-star match at a takeover. People weren't clamoring to see him face Kenny Omega when he finally got the big call-up. He was just a guy. His character's really good. They put him in interesting storylines, but he doesn't win all the time or ever. In fact, when he did just get his first major singles win the other week, everyone was like, oh wow, Jungle Boy won. That's exciting. When was the last time you watched WWE and went, ooh, so-and-so picked up a win? Colour me intrigued. Never. You can't remember. AEW's littered with people like that as well, who are either unheard of or who are just young and who eat enough losses so that the people they are trying to push can succeed as winners. And eventually, when they improve, when their time comes, you will believe that they have actually honed their craft and that maybe now they could be on the ascent. But at the same time, it won't kill them if they lose because you still receive them as inexperienced or as young, as people who are not just under 40 and should be winning wrestling matches. Tell you who is about the age of 40 and should be winning wrestling matches in AEW? The Bucks, Kenny Omega, Cody Rhodes, experienced veterans, Jon Moxley, people who pick up these big wins and, lo and behold, beat a lot of 20-somethings in order to maintain their status. There is a pecking order there, which makes it more entertaining. And this is the whole crux of the video. Like, NXT is a tremendous success in of its own right. I had more fun than I've ever had in my life doing the weekly roundup for that, because I genuinely enjoyed watching it as a product in its own right, but how it connects to the main roster is a huge problem for them. There is like virtually nobody they can call up to go at the bottom of that card. Everybody needs to go at the top, and as we've discussed, when everybody's at the top, nobody's at the top. Like, just to circle back to that thing about the two youngest people in the Rumble being Dominic Mysterio and Otis. Now, what are their NXT legacies? Yes, Otis was in it, but he didn't really do much. He didn't have any banging matches. He wasn't on TV every single week. Everybody thought Heavy Machinery got called up way too soon, and yet, lo and behold, he's actually been one of the more interesting things on the main roster because he's not burned out. He's not, like, he doesn't need to win all the time. You can just write stories for him where losing is part of that story. And Dominic Mysterio was never in NXT, so developmental, is it? Now, it's very easy to sort of say that the whole reason NXT has this problem is because they now pretty much talent scout big stars in order to compete with AEW, but the problem goes back way before that. Like, Nakamura and Balor were not unheard of, unearthed gems when they went to that company. They were two of the biggest stars in pro wrestling who had just been signed to get the WWE feel before they eventually went to the main roster. And since then, pretty much since those days, NXT's been on this path to creating a huge logjam for the main roster. If you've come here expecting an answer, by the way, or a solution to all this, I don't have one. Just interesting though. I think we're done with the images. They're just interesting though, isn't it? Like, NXT used to be the best thing they had, and now it's creating this fundamental amorphous blob problem for them. It's a real shame. Anyway, though, that's just something we thought was particularly interesting, looking at the numbers from the Rumble and realizing that, oh my god, there's no young guys in WWE. Everybody has to win, so nobody is winning anymore. But let us know, of course, what you made of it all in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. All that good stuff. You know how it is. In the meantime, though, thanks so much for watching. I've, of course, been Adam Cleary. Get me on Twitter at AdamClery. You know what it is by now. Anyway, thanks for watching. What Culture Wrestling. Have a nice day. Mwah. Much love to your mothers.